Hey guys! Happy Valentine's Day! You may not be watching this video on Valentine's Day. It might be the Saturday after Valentine's Day or the Saturday after that, but that doesn't make it any less valid because the quest for love is eternal and the journey towards love is also eternal and timeless. So it does not have to be posted on Valentine's Day for this video to be valid. I was gonna film this video tomorrow, but look at this weather, this beautiful natural light, and I was like, this cannot go to waste, so I'm filming right now. So these are the 5 tarot cards that you need to work with in order to find true love, and these 5 tarot cards represent my personal lessons that I have learned when it comes to love and relationships and self-love and having a healthy and loving relationship with myself. My pain, your EXP. So this video is not just for romantic relationships, so if you're single and happy like me, or if you're in a relationship, or if you're single and bitter and miserable, you can also watch this video, and I'm just going to be sharing with you the 5 lessons that I have learned, represented by 5 tarot cards that I have carefully picked out and selected, you know, archetypes that align with the lessons that I have learned, archetypes that I feel like represent what I have gone through, what I have alchemized within myself, what I have found within myself, and wisdom I found within myself. That brought me further appreciation for this card. It's kind of like, it's almost like renewing the relationship that I have with these cards. Hopefully by sharing these insights and lessons that I have learned through the lens of tarot and through these cards, you can hopefully bring this to your own personal tarot practice, maybe just as reference or inspiration, or just maybe some alternative perspectives on the cards, and hopefully it will add to your love readings or just readings in general, and I truly hope that this video is helpful to you. So I will be using the Modern Witch Tarot, which is a beautiful rendition of the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. This deck is much beloved in the tarot community, so if you don't own a copy, make sure you go get one. The first lesson that I have learned is represented by the Knight of Cups, and when I think of Knight of Cups, I think about romance and romantic gestures. When you think of romantic gestures, what are they? Being showered with gifts, being brought flowers, being serenaded to, or being told that you're awesome, lots of words of affirmation, you know, Prince Charming, fairy tale ending, Disney, Hollywood, rom-com type of vibes. And what I have learned is that romantic gestures does not equal love. What I personally learned is that when we get too fixated on romantic gestures, when you're constantly looking for what that person is doing for you, it's when we actually lack a solid foundation of love. It's actually, from my experience, a red flag urging us and warning us to examine the relationship itself. Because in my previous relationship, I found myself constantly getting fixated on the lack of romantic gestures from my partner. I would be looking for these things. I would be anticipating. I would just be hoping, as if these gestures could rescue me and reassure me that my partner was truly loving towards me. But what I found out after I broke up with this person was that we lacked a foundation of love, which was built on trust and mutual understanding and compatible values and shared values on how to show up in a relationship and what it means to show up in a relationship. We were really incompatible in that way, and that's why I was feeling very insecure and very anxious and was constantly looking out for romantic gestures from my partner. And it really spoke to a lack of awareness in that area, and a lack of discernment, not knowing what the problem really was. And I want you to understand something about romantic gestures and romance. Romance isn't just something that you have with a person. It's not something that you can only experience when you're with a romantic partner. Romance, by my definition, is the curiosity, adventure. It's your desire to feel like the star and the protagonist of your own life. It's about living that main character life, and you can be the character in your own story with or without a partner, because your partner, future partner, current partner is going to have their own storylines, their own timeline, and the timeline and the story that you co-create together is like a third entity, right? Which will have its own romances and its own joys and awesomeness and magic and everything, but you and your own timeline and your own storyline, you need to have your own romance in order to find true love. Because if you can make yourself happy, if you can have the adventures that you want to have without someone being there, if you can have the independence to take yourself out on solo dates and give yourself the pleasure and the things that you want and need and experience joy, not in the context of someone, like you don't have to feel like you need to be with someone so you can go on to a fancy restaurant. I actually don't really go to fancy restaurants. I much prefer cute, cozy cafes. You don't need someone else to take you out. Like, you don't really need to be taken out in order to experience those things. You can take yourself out. In fact, that's one of my intentions this year, is to romance myself as much as possible. And that simply just means that showing myself love and showering myself with love, with the things that I love and that I enjoy, is to have a practice of joy and curiosity and adventure. And Knight of Cups really represents that. Like, I just been writing more poetry, I just been reading more novels and also nonfiction, and also just doing the things that I truly love. It's about pursuing myself and pursuing a loving relationship with myself and doing things that make me happy. And I think, like, if you identify as a people pleaser, if you're like a chronic giver, if you're just, if you tend to be very considerate of other people's needs, often at the expense of yourself, or you prioritize them first before you look at your own needs and your desires. Knight of Cups is a good card to work with, because learning how to romance ourselves and learning how to take ourselves out and make ourselves happy and just do the things that we enjoy without someone else being there, or without the need to have someone else being there. Because I think when you find someone who is loving and who wants to experience those things with you, it's a whole different world. It's another field of magic. Both are equally wonderful and both are equally amazing. Example, for Valentine's Day this year, I'm planning to bake myself a big fat strawberry cake, and I've been thinking about this cake for a whole year and a half. I just have not found the time to bake this cake, and I'm finally going to bake this cake for myself on Valentine's Day. If I don't bake it on Valentine's Day, because it is a working day, I'm probably going to do it on a weekend. You gotta know how to romance yourself. And the whole reason why I'm emphasizing why you need to romance yourself and work with this card and really just get this energy in your solo person is, like, when you don't get caught up by romantic gestures, you don't get caught up with love bombing. Because if you can give those things to yourself, what else is on the table? You'll be looking at values, you'll be looking at compatibility, you'll be looking at mutual respect, and to see if this person is the healthy partner for you. When you have the self-awareness to know, like, what makes you happy, and knowing that you can do all those things yourself, you would focus on the actual, like, important things that will create a healthy relationship and, like, allow you to have healthy relationship dynamics. So that's why I think Knight of Cups is an important card to work with when it comes to tarot cards. So the second card that you can lean into when it comes to doing like a love reading, or just use as a checkpoint in your tarot practice, or just when it comes to your journey of finding true love, is obviously the Lovers. And this card is all about relationships. And before you get into a relationship with someone else, you need to look at the relationship that you are having with yourself, and also defining what a relationship is. Like, what does a relationship mean to you? What does it look like? Does it just mean going out with someone and doing things together? Because if that's all you do in a relationship, I would be very worried. So what's your relationship like with yourself? Do you take care of yourself? Do you accept yourself for who you really are? Do you hold space for yourself when it comes to uncomfortable emotions? Do you trust in your own decisions? Do you commit to the goals that you have set? Do you commit to your dreams? Do you believe in yourself? Are you investing in yourself? Because if you're not doing these things when you're single, or even when you're in a relationship, if you're not doing these things for yourself, if you don't have a healthy relationship for yourself, guess what happens? Is the relationship that you have with yourself will be a direct tell. Like, it's a telltale sign. Like, if I can look at your relationship with yourself and just like extrapolate a few elements, I can tell you exactly the type of person that you're gonna be with. Okay, so let me give you an example. If you don't have self-trust, if you don't trust in the decisions that you're making because maybe you're scared of failure, if you're scared of rejection, or you just don't have the process of arriving in your own conclusions because you don't know what you need, guess who you are going to attract? A control freak, because they will make all the decisions for you. So it's like, who you are when you're with yourself and by yourself, the type of relationship that you have with yourself, you can just kind of do the math and figure out the type of qualities that you're going to attract. So if you have like if you have powerful self-trust, if you trust yourself and trust your decisions, even if you end up making a mistake because you lack information or you just lack experience, if you trust yourself, you are going to be with someone or end up with someone who is going to trust in you, who has self-trust, and you guys can have a respectful relationship together, and you wouldn't be attracting a control freak who just wants you to do stuff for them, because your lack of self-trust directly allows that particular trait to happen, if you know what I mean. Work on your relationship with yourself and think about the types of relationships that you're having with yourself. The third card that you need to work with and look at when you are trying to find true love is the hierophant. So I know this can be like a card for marriage, but I think it means so much more than that. And hierophant to me represents tradition and culture. I admittedly don't really like saying hierophant in my readings because I am allergic to tradition or just doing things because that's just how it's supposed to be without really questioning it or without really relating it to yourself and figuring out if that's what you want. We all grow up with Disney's Happily Ever After. We all grow up with a lot of toxic ideas from Hollywood or mainstream media, or even just our closest relationships and our upbringing about what love is supposed to be like what you're supposed to be doing in a healthy relationship, or what you're supposed to be doing because this is your gender and this is your race or this is your culture. Like there's just like a lot of arbitrary things in our psyche, in our mind, that are running the show when it comes to us being in relationships with ourselves or especially with a person. And when we don't check those scripts, when we don't check what society and tradition and culture and upbringing has sort of programmed inside of us, we let those programs run us and we end up in relationships that aren't really authentic and that aren't really reflective of our values. So it's so important to look at the conditionings that we have and look at the limiting beliefs and the subconscious scripts that we have. Look at the culture that we grew up in so we can really truly figure out what true love means to us, because it's so important to be authentic in love. If you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want, what you need, and what makes you happy, you will never find true love just because you don't know what it is. You won't know it even if you see it. And you might just like settle for something that you think is true love because you just never thought about what you actually want. On that note, since we're working with a hierophant and it's all about norms and society and culture, I would just like to let you know that normal doesn't exist in love. There are common things that we look for in relationships, or you know what would be defined as a healthy relationship, but I just like to say that there's only what you want, what you need, and who you are as a person, and also finding someone who are compatible with you when it comes to those things. Like you want to find someone who has compatible values with you or share values with you. It's about who you are and who that person is and who you are together as a couple or as a group. Your relationship dynamic is unique to you and you get to set the norm. You get to define what a norm is. You don't have to worry about like, oh, should we be seeing each other like X times a week because this is what that couple is doing, or this is what that this is what's supposed to happen to even call this a relationship. You get to define the terms. You get to define what it means for you to be in a relationship. So the norm doesn't exist. The hierophant doesn't rule over relationships. No one is holding a checklist and just seeing like if you've done those things or not. You get to define those things. So a hierophant card is a great reminder for us to look at those things. So seeing the hierophant card in the reading is a great reminder to look at the things that confine us and look at the things that define us, and also define things for ourselves. So speaking of limiting beliefs and getting into the shadowy terrains of love and relationships, the Devil card is the next card you need to look at when you're trying to find true love, because we all have our inner demons and our inner monsters. And I think my main takeaway for the Devil card, for this card, is I think when it shows up in a reading, it's really just telling me to accept my weaknesses and facing my shadows, but with understanding and acceptance and grace. Because instead of making your weaknesses a character flaw or an existential statement about you not being good enough or you should have known this, etc., because you weren't that type of person, just take a more laid back and neutral look to it. And let me give you an example. So what I learned on my journey of love is identifying your traits and your qualities or your behavioral patterns that are creating toxic dynamics for you, or that are making you unhappy, that are sort of attracting similar types of people into your life. When you look at those qualities of yours, instead of like treating them as qualities, you treat them as skill sets, not a character flaw. So for example, if you tend to struggle with boundaries, you don't want to make that a character flaw. You don't want to tell yourself, oh, you're just like a doormat, you're like a freaking people pleaser, you're terrible, you're just like a weak person, blah blah blah. You don't want to make this into like a huge existential statement. You lacking boundaries is just because you suck. Not because you suck as a person, but because you need to develop the skills. And this is something that can be practiced. This is not reflective of your nature and your worthiness as a human being. This is not a statement about how not enough you are. It is a statement about your lack of skill when it comes to boundaries. So what I would do, or what you could do if you struggle with boundaries, if you're identifying with what I'm saying, is to just not demonize this part of you, not demonize your lack of boundaries into this existential darkness that you now have to carry and burden yourself with because you're this type of person. No, you just need to pick up a book about boundaries. That's all. And actually practice them, because boundary is a skill, as I've learned. And I think our ability to execute boundaries and really be truthful to ourselves and to the other person when it comes to boundaries obviously has a lot of subconscious programming and, what makes us not want to express a boundary, etc. There's definitely a lot of emotional elements to it. But what I'm saying is your mentality and mindset towards your shadows or sometimes your weaknesses, don't make that into a character flaw. Don't demonize it. Treat them with a lot of love. Imagine you're in this academy of love and you're the headmaster and you want to nurture the students in your academy, and by students I mean the traits in your brain, and you have this one student and the student is your boundary skills and the student is not performing well. And if you really want to nurture the student, you want to give it lots of love and encouragement and actual guidance on how to achieve better, not beat it so that it's just burdened with shame and now it can't even do anything. You know what I mean? So yeah, just because you suck at something doesn't mean you suck as a person, and it doesn't mean you're unworthy of love. You are always worthy of love and you're always enough, and it's just a skill that you need to pick up. So please don't demonize your weaknesses. Just treat them as weaknesses and work on improving them. And speaking of boundaries, we have the Justice card, which is all about boundaries. So just really quickly, here are a few things I learned about boundaries. And I think we think of the Justice card sometimes as really cold, really cutting, and I think we sort of feel that boundaries are the same thing, that it's something that keeps people apart from us. So a lot of times we're scared to voice our boundaries because we are afraid to break the connection with the person or even with ourselves or different parts of ourselves. And what I've learned is that a boundary is not a wall that you put up. It's not like a pair of scissors cutting the connection so you will be severed from the person and be away from certain behaviors or whatever. A boundary is really a code. It's really a way for you to communicate who you are as a person and what you're willing to tolerate and what your values are. Something else that I've learned is the kinds of people that require you to communicate the same boundary over and over and over and over and over, especially you've shown them that it's problematic, that you suffer from it, that you're in pain because of it, but they still do it over and over and over and over and over. They have no intention of respecting their boundaries in the first place. This is the type of person that they are. They're someone that doesn't respect boundaries. So it's so important to communicate your boundaries. A boundary really is just information about you, about what makes you healthy, what makes you feel safe, and what makes you feel loved. And the right person, a healthy partner who has the same value of respect as you, would treat your boundary as a way to love you better. Not someone who is just agreeing to your boundary and then doing the same thing over and over again, knowing that it's gonna hurt you. This just means that this person does not share your value of respect. Having that said, I just want to quickly mention that sometimes, even when you're with a loving partner and a healthy partner who is happy to respect your boundary and who is happy to love you better, sometimes it might take a few tries. And just because they forget one time by accident doesn't mean they don't love you or they don't respect you, because sometimes what's important for you is completely not on their radar because maybe grew up different, maybe they just have different worldviews about something, and it might take them a few times to kind of remember and incorporate them into your system. And I think it's important to have grace when it comes to that. You don't want to be too perfectionist and too controlling when it comes to the other person trying to show up for you, because the important thing is that they are consistently showing up for you and that they're showing effort. So don't be too perfectionist about it is also the other side of this. Don't be too perfectionist because it's going to create a lot of suffering for you and your partner. But yeah, a boundary is really your values, right? It's an understanding of what's fair for you, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel respected. It's a value that you have that defines who you are and how you would like to exist in this world and how you would like to be treated. So these are the 5 cards that you need to work with and need to look at when it comes to finding true love. I hope this video is helpful for you, and let me know in the comments what you think about these 5 cards. What are your go-to cards when it comes to finding romance or true love or cultivating or creating a healthy relationship with yourself or with someone else? Until next time, happy Valentine's Day, and I hope you always love yourself because you're worthy of love.